you have to do a lot of demand generation in a blue ocean because not a lot of people know about solutions like yours. A lot of times in a blue ocean, you have to create a category and educate people on that category. And that requires a lot of money. So if you're going to bootstrap, it might not be the best path for you. It's much easier to hitch a ride on a whale who's already, established themselves well within a red ocean. And then you can find maybe not even purple oceans, maybe they're like purple seas within that ocean. You provide something slightly innovative, maybe because it's focused on a certain vertical or a certain type of customer. You've tailored the solution for them. And so therefore you are innovating it to some degree within a much bigger market where there is a lot of demand that you can tap into.
Welcome to the Denney Bros Show, where us Denney brothers uncover what works for founders building businesses and navigating their entrepreneurial careers. We're setting out to interview the founders and the operators in the arena today so we can find the patterns and document the truth about what works. I'm Jon Denney.
And I'm Ethan Denney.
We're both co-founders of ConvertFlow, which helps marketers build funnels for any website without waiting on designers or developers. And in this episode, we dive deep into the lessons we've learned as first-time founders bootstrapping our software business to more than $1 million in annual recurring revenue. We cover how we found the idea for our business, as well as the creative funding strategies we've used, and some of the mistakes we've made along the way that got us our first win. Let's go.
Let's record an episode.
Yeah, that's the episode 1 here. All right, so today's episode, we're talking about I don't know how many lessons we've got here, but there are more than 10 lessons.
I think the title may say 10. Yeah.
Yeah, there's at least 10 lessons learned bootstrapping our SaaS company to $1 million plus in revenue here, ARR specifically. So just a quick recap on some of these lessons, or at least where we're at. We're more than $1 million a year in revenue. We have 4 full-time team members. I guess you could consider us a profitable micro SaaS. Would you say that, or?
Yeah, I would consider ConvertFlow micro SaaS today. However, we're doing what we need to do to build the company to 10 million in annual recurring revenue.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep, I agree.
So for context, ConvertFlow is a funnel builder. With it, brands, whether they're e-commerce or service businesses or online education, etc., they build funnels that help them convert more of their visitors into customers at a higher order value, or generate leads if they're providing services. And they can do that without having to wait on developers or rely on designers or anything like that. The marketers have that freedom and no-code ability to create all that stuff in ConvertFlow.
We started the company back in 2016, and through trial and error, we've learned a lot of lessons getting to this point, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more that we learn getting to 10 million a year in revenue. But we thought we'd recap a few of these lessons, so that it can help whoever's watching this.
Yeah. All right.
You will start with the first one.
Lesson 1 that I've written here. So lead with service first and then productize second. So on this note, when we started ConvertFlow 2016, Ethan and I had been running a marketing agency for like a year or two at this point.
I think we ran it for about 3 years total.
3 years total. Okay. I think it was 2014 we started the marketing agency.
Okay.
And we were doing all sorts of digital services. We were websites, marketing campaigns, email marketing, marketing automation, advertising, etc. And it was through that process that we saw a lot of problems that brands have, when it comes to marketing and, their websites and the data that's needed for all of that. And from there, we started to refine services and started to package, specific services for problems that we felt like we could solve best, right? And that clients valued the most, right? And from that, there was a lot of learnings. We were understanding the process and, the pain points for the client, but also for ourselves as like implementers of like marketing technology and like marketing campaigns, playbooks, and all of that. I don't know if you want to add anything to this, Ethan.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We were building out funnels for different types of companies, e-commerce brands, different types of service-based businesses as well. So like you were saying, we're solving the problem. We were, we understood the process because we were doing it as a service. We were understanding the pain points because we were having to custom code everything. We were having to design everything. We were having to extract the sort of insights and vision from the clients and their goals and their challenges, and trying to solve that on the marketing side in order to generate more customers for them. So we were understanding those different pain points, and then from there, we eventually built software to reduce some of the pain points, primarily on the service fulfillment side, right? Like to be able to achieve the goals of building out a funnel or building out different types of campaigns that would help generate more customers from a client's website, but would reduce the amount of time and effort involved in actually achieving that. So the software helped us reduce certain pain points that we were encountering, and eventually when the clients were able to use the software directly that they encountered, and that's how we ended up building Commercial as a software business.
Right. So 2016, we developed software based off of kind of what we had been doing for the clients, right? And kind of stitching together duct tape and bubble gum, scripts, plugins, a lot of WordPress stuff back then, all the different email marketing tools, the API calls. So we were doing all this stuff manually, just one by one for each client. I remember like setting up MailChimp forms for clients, and it just made me want to blow my brains out because like I was coding MailChimp forms over and over and over and over. So like there was clearly gaps in the market. We tried like a lot of the software tools at the time, and none of them really spoke to each other well, and weren't really servicing the full process. So that kind of informed it created an itch that we need to scratch. So that comes to lesson number 2, which is to scratch your own itch. Now, right. What does that mean? It means that you've got a problem, you got a burning problem, you know it well. You could empathize with yourself as a user when you scratch your own itch, or as a customer right off the bat. So you can immediately start building for yourself and understand the problem really well and actually solve it for yourself. However, there are some caveats to scratching your own itch. You are not reflective of the market. You're reflective of a sliver of the market, right? You are one anecdote, the first anecdote of what honestly needs to be hundreds of anecdotes to help you figure out what, you're offering to the market in the best way that fits with the customer, right? But you yourself, as that first anecdote, it's the first place to start, right? So, relating back to ConvertFlow, we definitely had an itch around, building forms that connected to CRMs and marketing analytics platforms and websites. And like I mentioned, there was other software tools, but they didn't really do it in the way that we found worked for our clients, right? So we just first created, a simple, minimal viable product, as they call it, to solve our own problem. And that was not what the market really wanted, but it was somewhere to start. So we were our own first customer, right?
Yeah, I think you pointed out something that was interesting there. And I think we'll eventually get to another point that we're talking about here, but there's like minimal viable products, right? And then minimal sellable products. Like minimal viable products, like again, like are a solution to your own problem, right? You're validating that solution. But then eventually, like you said, you got to be able to take it to other markets, right? You got to be able to take it to other customers. And the way that those problems need to be solved for them might not be the exact same way that you're solving it for yourself. And so it's really important to get customer feedback along the way, so that you can start iterating the product and tailoring it to solve it for different types of customers or a specific type of customer beyond yourself.
So the key, to doing that, to building that MVP, is to start, with service, right? It's really to understand that problem well. This doesn't have to be, through like providing like services independently. It could be working at a company, right? Actually, overwhelmingly, what I've seen with other successful software business owners is that they felt a problem that they ended up wanting to solve while working at a company.
Right.
And they understood it well. They understood the stakeholders, the decision makers, the roles, that would use that software, maybe the budget and all. And that informed them to, productize that into, a more refined, self-service type of software. But really, you got to do it manually first. You got to solve the problem first. You got to understand it first, and solve it
and understand
manually.
The process. Right.
Exactly.
And by doing that, like, you understand the process, and can find points in that process that you want to start productizing through your own software.
Right.
All right. So the next point here. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was lessons number 1: service first and productize second, and then to scratch your own itch.
Right. So lesson number 3 that we've learned here, that I think applies, probably to a lot of people, is getting in the room with your customers. Right. So what this means is, go talk to them in person if you can. Right. That might be at conferences. That might be like by going to the actual physical location of where they work and following them around, seeing their process for how they're trying to currently solve the problem that you're, thinking about solving with your software. If you can't get in front of them in person, then obviously, hop on Zoom calls, do what you got to do online in order to talk to them. Or if you're like able to get in communities and things like that, where you're able to interact and kind of see how people are solving things, that's helpful too. But if you can, nothing replaces being able to, talk to them in person. If you go to like a conference, for example, where you're going to meet a bunch, that's one of the best ways to get a lot of feedback, because you're able to quickly navigate through a bunch of, conversations, and you can start seeing patterns on how they're solving problems and how they're thinking about things. Anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think a huge problem a lot of software founders, and startups face is they try to hide behind the keyboard, right? A lot of times they're, they've got a technical background, maybe they're not too sales oriented, and you need to talk to your potential customers to be able to empathize with them and go beyond just like scratching your own itch, like we talked about earlier. And trying to make that happen online, if you don't already have a significant network, like a warm network to go to those customers, is really slow. It can take months of, trying to, cold email people, direct message people, or like talking on forums, or like running surveys. That stuff can help, but it's just too slow. Now, if you can get into the room where there's a bunch of people that all have a common denominator about, having the same problem, right? You can talk to dozens of them in a day, and you just get this insane context download into your brain that now you come out of there, you're like, oh man, I know what to do. Like, there's always that feeling when you've talked to a lot of customers or a lot of potential customers in a short period of time. So go get in the room. It costs money, yes, but this is some of the best investments that you can make. It's investing in yourself, your ability to see the market, the problems, what to choose what to work on. Because if you work on the wrong thing, that is a major loss. So figuring out what's the right thing to work on is a great investment. So spend the money. On this note, so when starting ConvertFlow, Locally, we would go to the marketing like meetups and all of that.
Right.
So there was some patterns that was kind of forming there, but it was kind of a mixed bag. You had like a lot of local businesses, and you had some that were like maybe more coaching oriented. And then occasionally you would have a more like technical, like startup or e-commerce business that was more online. So it informed though.
Yeah, the great thing about meetups is that like, you don't have to spend a bunch of money to go to them, right? So that's one like low cost way to get in front of some customers in person. Well, like a conference would obviously cost more.
Exactly. It's more consistent, a meetup, and it's more affordable and sustainable. However, there are these like annual user conferences and giant, events that happen. And there you got to spend the money. You got to, get the ticket. You got to fly. You got to get the hotel. And like I said, I think that is an amazing investment. Ethan, I don't know if you remember, but I mean, you obviously do remember when we started ConvertFlow, there was a big user conference of our first integration. And we went there, and I don't think we had we didn't have the money to go. Like, we took a loan from PayPal to afford to go to that thing. But
I remember,
it completely changed the trajectory of what we were doing. And ConvertFlow exists because we took that bet on ourselves. We took that risk, and it paid off.
Exactly. There were 3,000-4,000 people at that conference, and we obviously, with our own money on the line and money that we didn't have on the line that we had to pay back, try to make the most of that event by talking to people, getting feedback, understanding how they're solving the problems, and obviously talking about our product as well and trying to get their feedback on the product. But that was really helpful because we probably spoke to hundreds of people, and if you try to replicate that online, how long is that going to take? Reaching out, you have to reach out to X number of people to get X number of replies, to get X number of people on a call. Yeah, it could take forever. So if you just spend, you put it on a credit card, and spend however much it costs to go to an annual, conference or a big user conference, might cost you a couple $1,000 or more, but ideally, it won't cost you more than a few $1,000s usually to get out. And if you can do it in a cost effective way, to go to one of these conferences, and you'll save yourself, a year's worth or 6 months worth of outreach to in order, get people on calls and have conversations with them. So, it's totally worth doing something like that.
And like this thing about taking loans and credit cards and all that stuff, this is not personal finance advice, like disclaimer. No. However, we are talking about the realities of starting up, and especially when you're doing it, when you're bootstrapping, right? You get creative about how you could finance things. And, you could really, work backwards from, is this a good investment or is it not? People spend money on things that don't pay off all the time. So it maybe it's taboo to hear someone say, hey, I put this conference on a credit card, it's $3,000. And a lot of times people will say that was a bad idea, right? But they don't see the vision that you have, right? About starting the business, which ends up paying off. So, obviously, consider those opinions, but recognize it may not be taboo to them if you put $3,000 to buy a TV or something like that. So it depends on what you want to invest in. But again, it's not personal finance advice. We're just trying to, talk about the realities of starting a business and bootstrapping and creative finance.
And if you go back to like our first lesson, which was around, servicing customers, servicing the market first, and then building product second, productizing second. If you go to one of these conferences and you're, trying to understand how, how these customers are solving their current problem, you're trying to understand their process, and you can help them with that process and get, paid like as a service, you probably will break even or ideally make some money on the conference, and pay for all the learnings that you're going to gain, that can then translate into what you build into a product.
Right. So if you're leading with service, you're not going to wait until you have this perfect software to be able to make money.
Right.
You're going to figure out maybe how to offer it as consulting. or some sort of service package where you're just manually doing it to solve the problem for someone that has a burning issue, right? And is willing to pay money to get it done. So you can, make your money back if you're willing to go right to services and use that as a learning vehicle and a funding vehicle to be able to inform how to build the right software.
Exactly. So our next lesson here is to follow the tech adoption curve. So I'm going to pull this up really quick. So the tech adoption curve, when it comes to building a SaaS product or any sort of technology product, you basically have this curve that breaks up different segments of the market, and those different segments of the market adopt technologies in different ways and at different times.
All right. So what do we see here? So there's multiple stages, right? We've got the innovators. And if you were to, I always like to use the Apple iPhone as like an example here, right? When they launched the iPhone, it was like 2008, 2009. Who did they have to win over? They had to win over the journalists, right? So they were like, there was all these like Mac, Apple blogs and technology blogs that were freaking out over this thing. And so what do? They share it with the world, right? And all these early adopters that read those, tech blogs and, maybe it was like some YouTube channels at that time to, see how this iPhone works. Those were the early adopters, right? And then there's the chasm. We'll talk about that more in a second. And then there's the early majority, which is the people after the fact. So these were like the first people buying that like iPhone 3GS and all of that. And then the early majority was more so like the people maybe getting the iPhone 4, who was like, they were seeing their friends, they were seeing those early adopters buying those iPhones, right? So like, I'm going to get an iPhone too. So it depends on the last stage. And then, late majority is like when your mom gets the iPhone, and then laggard would be like when your grandma reluctantly goes from the flip phone, the dumb phone to the smartphone and all. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Ethan.
No, I think that's a great way to explain it. Exactly. So you've got those different segments of the tech adoption curve, and getting the next segment, relies on winning over the previous segment, right? So if you want to win over the early adopters, then you need to kind of win over the innovators. And then if you want to win over the early majority, then you need to win over the early adopters. So sometimes founders may go after a certain market, right, and not understand what point in the market they're going after, what segment. And so they may go sell to the laggards, right, which might be in their warm network, or it might be like what they have easy access to. And then they might feel a lot of friction and not understand why their product is not being perceived well, or why they're not receptive to it. But it might be just because you're targeting a later stage in the, someone who's in a later stage of the tech adoption curve. So I wouldn't waste time if you're a bootstrap SaaS founder, if you're starting, a SaaS company or any sort of technology company, selling to laggards initially. You want to sell to those innovators and the early adopters. And the reason why is, they're constantly looking out for new technologies. So they're looking, they're passionate about the space. They're looking to get an edge, and they're willing to take on and try out different tools, even if those tools are buggy, are not complete. They're willing to try out different tools so that they can have the custom solution that they want, or so that they can have an edge, or just because they like the space and they like tinkering with things. So starting with the innovators and then eventually moving on to the early adopters, that's who you should focus on, and trying to find out who those are, in your market, or who that type of customer is. Super. And going back to the idea of going to conferences and getting in the room, if you go to a conference, a lot of times you have people who are paying to go to those conferences, which means they're passionate about the space, or they want to learn more, or they care about investing, around, to be around other people like them. And so that is a great place to find those innovators and early adopters, so that you can get that feedback and maybe even win your first few customers.
To add to that, you'll notice here it says the chasm. So this is actually famously from this book called Crossing the Chasm. The reason why there's this gap here is a lot of times startups and companies tend to have challenges making that jump from the innovators and the really, really savvy early adopters to the more kind of mainstream early adopters and early majority. And that's typically where they have to overhaul things, make things like much cleaner, less frictionless, et cetera, more frictionless, and then, speak to a more mainstream audience. But if you want to dive into this concept more, read the book, Crossing the Chasm, super good.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so next we've got a lesson around creating a minimal sellable product. So I want to add one thing here, and then Jon, if you've got some feedback that you want to add, feel free to. Okay. So there, for a long time, minimal viable products were, a popular concept that everyone kind of within the startup industry, followed and used as a means to, build product and how they approach things. But the reality is, as soon as you go beyond, finding a workable solution that works for you to get the outcome, and you try to sell it to someone else, that's when you see things break and you start running into issues. And that's where a minimal sellable product is really important. And if you use that as like the direction you're moving towards, right, your goal, when you're building your initial product, then it's all about getting to first dollar with a customer when it comes to your product. And so that means that you have to understand how to package it, how to position it, and how to price it. And so we can dive into that in just a little bit more here. Is there something you want to add before we keep going?
Yeah, so like an MVP is really for yourself and like scratching your itch as like a user, right? It's like a problem solution. You're like finding the right solution to a problem, like figuring that out, but you're not really worried about how you like package and position, price, and all of that. So the MVP is really good, maybe for your one network to like have some people try out. Really forgiving types of people who are just testing, like, does this work? In gaming, there's the concept of the alpha test, right? Which is private, it's kind of behind the scenes. It's not really designed to show to the market. But you're checking, is the gameplay fun? Does it work? Like, is the core loop there? That's what like an MVP is about. But a MSP, a minimal sellable product, like Ethan's saying, it's now you have to think about how is it packaged? What is it called, right? How do you price it, like for the first customers and all of that? So you definitely want to start there. And the key thing there is optimizing for learnings when you go to market initially with your minimal sellable product. You're not trying to make a profit at this stage. You might just be eating the cost of the servers and this and that, but you need some first data point about a dollar value that when people give you money for the product, if it's real or not. Because a lot of people will say, yeah, I'll buy it. And it's like when it comes time to do it, they don't buy it. And those were people who their feedback, while it was worth something, wasn't as valuable as the feedback from someone who paid you something. So with a minimal sellable product, you're optimizing for learning, not for making a profit, but you still need to be able to collect dollars because there's a filter between those who will pay you money and those who won't. Something I love, I've seen a lot of companies do is we did this, was they will start with selling an annual or like a lifetime an annual plan or like a lifetime deal for the first customers. So that way they could collect, significant revenue up front, and in exchange for the customer just having like a set price forever, or like a one-time price forever, where it's enough friction where you're kind of filtering out those who are not going to give you good feedback. And you're actually validating that there's like significant interest in the product while also raising money to be able to self-fund some of the development here if you're bootstrapping.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when you're offering a minimal sellable product, like, I've seen some people charge primarily for services that are like tech enabled, And then I've seen people who sell their products and offer a service as part of the price, but what they're primarily selling is the product, right? And they're using service to basically bridge the gaps for, things that the product doesn't do yet, right? And they're just trying to cover their costs on that, right? They're, like you said, not really trying to make a profit. They're optimizing for learnings. A good example of this was a company called Pry, who they built a like financial modeling software. So kind of like a spreadsheet, but basically allows you to like run different scenarios and models for your business and kind of project and plan for how the business may go. If you want to grow 3x, like what inputs do you need in order to, grow 3x? Or, if you were to back off, your marketing spend, how is that going to affect your growth over the next few months, right? So they model out different scenarios. Anyhow, what they did initially was provide a very low cost service on top of their product so that they could learn, right? But they sold the product at a certain price and then they sold the service at a certain price. I've seen the other scenario where people, they start with the service and they start selling a lot, sell the service at a really high price, right? Obviously, because, they're delivering a complex solution to the customer, and they use the product to kind of enable the service. Well, depending on what you're trying to do and how you're trying to go to market, like, and what you want your product to eventually become, that might not be the strategy you want to take, because you're optimizing around learnings for how do you sell a high priced service rather than how do you sell a product that might be more self-serve. And so if you start with, let's say, pricing around the product and then use service to bridge the gap, you may charge a small fee, or kind of work it into the price of the product, or just don't charge for the service, right?
Right. You're just delivering upon a product on their end, and then in the back end, you may have like 10% of it that's like service enabled,
right?
If needed, right? So you can be able to get to market faster, right? While you figure out like what software to build to like automate that last 10% to make it fully self-service.
Yeah. And before we move on to like the next lesson here, I just wanted to highlight the three main things here when it comes to a minimal sellable product. There is, how you package that product, right? How you position it, and then how you price it. So positioning a lot of times comes down to like, what is the use case that it focuses on? What is the vertical or the target customer that it's made for, right? And you may change that over time. And this affects the price, right? So for example, if you build a software for, I don't know, let's say freelancers, right? That product might need to be priced at an amount that a freelancer can afford, right? But if you, I don't know, build a product for, let's say, customer success teams, right? Then you're tapping into a whole other type of budget, and so you can price for that, right? So thinking about the package, how you package it, how you position it. Positioning also comes down to like, who are you targeting, right? Who's the vertical? What's the vertical? Who's the target customer? And then pricing, and the pricing is obviously greatly affected by who you're targeting. So minimal sellable product, you're constantly testing those different levers and optimizing them to, and to learn to figure out like what's the best position, what's the best price to kind of go to market with, and what's the best way to package your product so that the customer can understand it quickly.
It's your first hypothesis about, how your product fits with the market. And an MVP doesn't necessarily do that. So an MSP, minimal sellable product, does.
Yep. All right, moving on to the next lesson. So the next lesson would be to hitch a ride on a whale, or also known as be a suckerfish, because the suckerfish is the one that, is riding on the momentum of the whale, who's doing the work of, moving quickly through the ocean or moving quickly through the market, or, I'm not exactly sure how to explain that too well, but basically, there are companies within your industry or within the industry that you want to focus on that, they're the biggest company in the space, or they might be one of the bigger companies in the space. They've done the expensive hard work of gaining a lot of customers in that industry, building trust, building solutions for that customer, and building a whole ecosystem to service that customer. You as a suckerfish can benefit by being involved in that ecosystem by, hitching a ride with that whale, rather than having to build it all yourself, right? And so that is a much more efficient way to go to market. And especially when you're building a SaaS company, it can also make a lot of decisions around who your customer is, how do you go to market, how your product evolves, can make a lot of those decisions more, easier to make. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so some examples came to mind. For like a consumer like software service, like imagine like a fitness tracker type of thing. You could build a fitness tracker, right? But imagine like you had to input like your weight and like your calories and your steps like every day manually all the time. Like that sounds like very painful, like not something that a lot of people want to do. However, like iPhone users, there's a health app and there's a step tracker and all of that. And maybe there's locations like tied to like restaurants or something like that that could be utilized. When you choose an ecosystem to start with, you can very easily isolate what that person looks like, how they're looking for a solution to their problem. So if you start with, let's say, users of the health, app on the iPhone, right? And you build like an add-on to that. Now what you can do is you can show up in the Apple App Store, right? You can go to Apple, related events or health related events. You can follow communities, Reddits, things like that online. Maybe websites that are like fitness related things for iPhone users and all of that. And you could start there to find those like early adopters. Okay, so another example, let's say it's like a service business, right? Imagine like accounting. Everyone understands or knows, that you need accounting services. But accountants, if you're to go start today, there's a bunch of different accounting software. So if you chose to focus on, companies that already pay for QuickBooks, yeah, exactly. Like it's very clear. You can optimize for QuickBooks users, right? QuickBooks customers and all. But maybe you wanted to go more niche. Maybe there's like, I don't know, Ramp or like Brex or like one of these like really, niche, softwares that have accounting functionality. You could focus on providing accounting services to them. And then you can very easily target them and find them because they're customers of Brex or Ramp or QuickBooks or whatever, right? Now in software, like B2B software, SaaS, right? There's way better examples here. So choosing like a platform ecosystem, for example, Salesforce, like there's God knows how many, unicorn companies built on top of the Salesforce ecosystem. And it's really easy for them to go to the Dreamforce event and participate in Salesforce meetups and, be able to sell to customers who already pay for Salesforce. Like there's a lot of like, ideal customer profiling. There's a lot of targeting, a lot of, community things already baked in to choosing an ecosystem and starting there, building on top of their platform. Other examples, Klaviyo, $1 billion in ARR for Shopify. So Shopify's a big tech company. They've got, they're worth like 100 billion market cap and they have millions of customers. And like, Klaviyo was able to build an email marketing service on top of the Shopify platform, selling to just Shopify customers and be able to sell to all the agencies and partner with all the agencies and go to the events and target only Shopify customers and participate in their app store. A lot of times it's like manifests in like an app store. It's a really good sign where there's like a directory of like connected apps and so on. So yeah, hitch a ride on the whale, be a suckerfish.
All right, so this leads us to our next lesson, which is capture demand first and then generate demand second. So demand I think you have a point here, some point. I don't know if you want to explain it. But basically, in my understanding of demand is just, how do you measure, the number of people that are currently looking for solutions? Is there something you want to add to that?
Yeah. So people, demand is people aware of their problems, now looking for a solution. So something triggered them to look for a solution to a problem. They're now in market. They're looking for a solution to a problem that they know that they have, right? And if you're a bootstrap company, start with those people, the people that are looking to buy solutions, vendors, whatever, today, as opposed to trying to generate demand, which is a longer sales cycle, which requires, catching people who maybe aren't aware of their problem yet and making them aware of their problem and then offering your solution. That is a longer customer journey that you may not be able to afford as a bootstrap company. But if there is demand to capture, that implies that there's it's a really good idea or a company to start, because you could see that there are competitors. You want to see competitors. If you don't see competitors, that's concerning, right? Maybe there's, not enough people looking for it. And there's a lot of expensive demand generation work, which, going back to the last thing, you should ideally rely on a big platform ecosystem to do a lot of that demand gen with their investor money to do that demand generation for you. So that way you can capture it in a very efficient way with a shorter sales cycle. So what does this look like? It looks like existing competitors and vendors. Maybe you could see very clear keyword search volume for Google. You see conversations on social media, kind of rallying around the same keywords and all, right? There's clearly like a problem, and like they're clearly looking for solutions. You see
another thing would
solutions.
Be, yeah, exactly. Comparing solutions. Another one would be like, you can see that there's a clear demand for services within that problem or ecosystem or something, or for that type of solution. So if there's a big service economy already around it, then there's a huge opportunity for products to come in and provide a more affordable and self-service sort of solutions to those problems.
It's also a good sign if there are already like meetups forming around that problem, like people trying to solve that problem, because you can go to those meetups and talk to them and get that feedback. So this kind of goes to the whole red ocean versus blue ocean concept. So Ethan, you've talked a lot about that. I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, basically red ocean, there's a lot of competitors. It's a much bigger market. It's established. There's a lot of, investment and competitors in the market, right? A lot of solutions. And as a result, there's potentially a lot of money to be made in that market, but you're going to have to compete your way, through the market in order to get to a point of like measurable success. Versus a blue. It's red because it's bloody, right? And then, the alternative is a blue ocean. And a blue ocean is clean. There's not a lot of competitors. Actually, there may not be any competitors. And there's fewer sharks, lots of opportunity for, new technologies, new solutions to basically own the market, right? The problem is that you have to do a lot of demand generation in a blue ocean because not a lot of people know about solutions like yours, right? And
they don't know that they have the problem.
They don't know how they have the problem. A lot of times in a blue ocean, you have to create a category and educate people on that category. And that requires a lot of money, right? So if you're going to bootstrap, might not be the best path for you unless you're going to raise, some money. But it's much easier to hitch a ride on a whale who's already, established themselves well within a red ocean. And then you can find, what we may call purple oceans, or maybe not even purple oceans. Maybe they're like purple seas within that ocean. Yeah, where you're basically, you provide something slightly innovative, maybe because it's focused on a certain vertical or a certain type of customer. You've tailored the solution, for them, and so therefore you are innovating it to some degree within a much bigger market, where there is a lot of demand that you can tap into.
Yep. So there's a book on this. It's called Blue Ocean Strategy. Highly recommend it. Awesome book. Okay. The next lesson. So compete with an 800-pound gorilla. So the reason why this lesson, is on here is because, if there's not a massive competitor in your space, that means that it's far less likely that you're going to have a successful business. The fact that there's already a really successful company in your space is a really, really good sign, but they're an incumbent. They're established, and you're, David versus Goliath in this scenario, right?
They might be the gold standard.
They might be the gold standard. They may have a bunch of venture capital and all, but this shouldn't scare you. I see a lot of times you hear people say, people already raised money in this space. Like there's already an income, there's already a publicly traded, company in this space. How am I going to compete with them? Well, the truth is that as a startup, you can. And the reason why is because those massive competitors, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, is less focused. They're slower, and you're fast, you're nimble, right? And maybe it's not the giant, publicly traded company that you're so scared of. Maybe it's just a company that's already raised like venture rounds recently, and they look like they're swooping in and getting a lot of the market. Well, if you're, in it for the long run, right, what you'll find is that a lot of times those venture-backed companies, they get bought and they kind of fizzle out. The founders move on from the companies, or they run out of money, even though it looks like they're doing really well because they're doing it in a really unsustainable way. And then you're still there, right? And you're still an established vendor. So let the 800-pound gorilla, which would be the big publicly traded company, let them, spend all the money to generate the demand and all of that. Let the venture-backed companies spend the money on unsustainable go-to-market strategies, and then survive and be around for a long time. And you'll actually come to find that the 800-pound gorilla incumbent becomes so slow and convoluted that you're able to compete. You could compete with them. You compete with them very effectively. And then the up and coming venture-backed companies, a lot of times, most of them end up getting bought and then becoming stale, and the energy moves away from their company. And you can survive that.
Yeah. So I think you were doing this, and I think it's important, which is to kind of separate the 800-pound gorilla versus like the venture-backed companies also within that red ocean or within, that market, because there are lots of startups that, are not the 800-pound gorilla, but are quickly capturing market share and are raising a lot of money, and they're growing quickly. But like you said, a lot of times because they raise money, they need to have an exit. So they need to get acquired, or they need to move towards an IPO. And if they're not going to be able to IPO, then they have to get acquired. And a lot of times once a company gets acquired, the product kind of fizzles away. And, it becomes part of the overall strategy for that company that acquired them. And, their presence or position or strength in the market may actually decrease, in time. So don't always worry about your venture-backed competitors. The 800-pound gorilla, however, competing directly with them really comes down to competing for problems and for target customers that they don't find profitable enough or attractive enough to compete for, or they don't really care if you are dominating in that specific vertical or for a specific problem, because the 800-pound gorilla, their problems and their opportunities, what motivates them to focus on a specific problem or a specific market or opportunity is how much they're going to be able to make. And so if it's just not interesting enough to them, they're not going to focus on it much, right?
You could find the niches to compete in.
Exactly. So that's where you have the opportunity to compete with 800-pound gorilla, is for specific problems or for a specific type of customer. Even if you were to replicate a lot of the product that an 800-pound gorilla has, maybe, but you do it for a certain type of customer that maybe it's just, vertical. It's not a very big vertical. You can service that customer really well, and the 800-pound gorilla may not even care. A good example of this was MailChimp and ConvertKit, right? So MailChimp, huge behemoth of a company in the email marketing space, probably the biggest and most popular email marketing company. They have something like 3 million customers, I believe. And then ConvertKit, founded by Nathan Barry, wanted to also build an email marketing solution, right? But the way that they competed against MailChimp, and also other players in the space, like Infusionsoft, which became Keep, things like that, is by focusing on a specific vertical or customer type, which was professional bloggers. And so I don't think MailChimp, as big as they were, really cared about that specific market, or Keep or Infusionsoft or some of the other players there. I don't think they really cared about that specific market, but ConvertKit did, and they focused there and built a multi-decamillion-dollar SaaS company.
So to add to that, I do think it's a generational thing. A lot of times these target niches and all, maybe that 800-pound gorilla got built, in a different time, right? Maybe over the past, a decade ago, really got started. And maybe they are selling in that tech adoption curve, to these more mainstream, segments of it, the early majority and late majority, who are a little bit, behind the curve, right? And so there's there's newer cohorts, which may be a different generation of users and customers. They may use different terminology. They may follow different influencers. They may use other products and have a slightly different looking technology stack because they're getting the new best stuff. And, the 800-pound gorilla just maybe doesn't yet, have the information or just hasn't caught up to what people are doing today, what they're implementing today, what they're calling it today, who they're following today. And you can do that as a startup or as a bootstrap, company, because you're small and you're fast, you're agile, and you could catch the cohorts that are coming in right now, and then perhaps become an 800-pound gorilla yourself, or build a very profitable small software company that's able to get customers very efficiently, right?
Exactly.
Another note here is that these 800-pound gorillas, they as they scale up, they tend to have worse support because they're having to do it at massive scale. So the support becomes more and more automated. There's high turnover in that industry, so the reps are less trained. They're less close to the specific customers and their problems, and they have less context. Another thing is that, as they are in later, funding rounds or they're publicly traded, they need to increase prices. They need to monetize every single thing. So they switch into a monetization stage where your company may not need to fulfill or match that growth. So you can price differently to undercut them, right? So there's this cycle of new companies coming in where their energy is, around them. The early adopters are interested in them, and they're also affordably priced, and the energy goes to them, right? And then while the incumbent is currently monetizing the more mainstream buyers, who those incumbents are eventually going to have to figure out how to catch the new cohorts and compete with you, and hopefully you become an 800-pound gorilla in the process,
Or they acquire you.
Yeah.
All right. So the next lesson here that we've learned, and I think a lot of other SaaS companies have learned as well, is to double down on one channel. So going from 0 to $1 million a year in revenue and annual recurring revenue, your company, our company, we've tried a lot of different tactics and channels. You'll probably have to try a lot of different channels to find the one that, you have enough traction with and that's sustainable enough for you to be able to double down on it and and try to exhaust before moving on to additional channels,
or at least like reach a point where improving that channel is more like incremental and not like non-incremental. But yeah, there's usually one channel that people repeatedly focus on to get to $1 million a year. See that over and over. But to find that channel, you do have to try a number of different things. So I would say up to that first like 250,000 in ARR, we were doing a lot of different things to just see like what was working. In hindsight, like there are definitely channels that map better to certain go-to-market strategies and certain unit economics. So maybe that's like, based off the unit economics of your company. Let's say you're a SaaS company and it's like $20, $30 a month, $10 a month. You can't afford to do enterprise sales, right? So you're not going to have like a sales-led go-to-market. There's other go-to-markets. There's product-led, there's sales-led, there's marketing-led, and there's partner-led, right? So based off, the pricing of and the unit economics of your business, you could kind of choose, okay, what go-to-market do I need to focus on? Okay, if we're $20, $30 a month, we're probably going to need to go heavy on the product-led, heavy on the marketing-led, and perhaps less so on like partner and sales-led, right? But if you're an enterprise sales company, maybe the like bottoms-up product-led, which would be like, like kind of like what Dropbox did, where they had like virality, people sharing the product with their team and all that stuff. Maybe like for enterprise, like Calendly, like maybe if you're doing like an enterprise service where you don't have, it's not based off like a giant team or something like that. You're just selling some expensive software. Maybe you just need to go sales led, right? And maybe you need to go partner led to the agencies that influence, or the consulting firms that influence those enterprise companies, right? Yeah. So choose those go to markets based off your unit economics, and then with those go to markets, again, partner led, sales led, product led, marketing led. There's different channels, right? And then try those channels, right? And see which one is working for you. Get some traction in that channel and then double down on that. So stop doing other things that are not working. You have to go to market efficiently, right? You can't be doing a bunch of things that aren't working. You need to focus, right? Because you have a limited team, you have limited money, limited resources. And that is how you get to that first $1 million. We did it with product-led go to market. So it was like SEO, search engine optimization, based off of like people looking for free tools and looking for templates and looking for like software and comparing software. Like these are things that are these are search engine keywords that are very tied to like the product, right? People inviting their team and sharing it with their team internally, and also it's very much a product-led go to market, and that meant that the channels were primarily SEO. So we focused on SEO after like 250,000 in ARR, and we doubled down there, and that's how we got to 1 million.
Now getting to 250,000 a year in revenue or an ARR, we tried a bunch of different channels, right? And so I think if we understood that concept of here are these different types of go-to-market models or approaches, right? Sales-led, marketing-led, product-led, partner-led, then, and we understood our pricing and who our target customer was, we understood those things better, then I think we could have experimented with fewer channels initially, trying to find what works instead of throwing things against the wall to see what sticks. We experimented with a bunch. We found that, like, for example, co-marketing with integration partners, webinars, doing outreach, doing a number of strategies like that helped us get to that initial first 250K ARR. But yeah, if we understood like the specific type of customer we were going after and what go-to-market model would be most efficient to get to them based on the type of organization we wanted to build, type of business we want to build, and what's required to get to that customer, that would have limited the scope or the number of channels for us to really focus on, which would have been really useful.
Doing, enterprise style, like cold outreach to sell like $100 a month software, it's just not sustainable. Like even though it may have worked, it wouldn't have been sustainable. So we had to cut it, right? And so on.
Exactly.
All right. Next lesson.
Next, I think this is more in your realm, but you take the lead on this one because it's more of your realm.
Okay. don't worry about technical debt. So technical debt is like when you're building things in a certain way that you know you're going to have to like redo later. And you can, price it almost as like, oh, X number of developer hours and all that. So it's like debt that you have to pay off in the future. Well, startups, we tend to get really worried about like, oh, building the software in a scalable way. Are we going to end up like having this massive bill later that we have to pay? It's something that is on our minds, right? But what's more expensive than paying off technical debt is building the wrong software. So if you're spending the time designing, you're spending the time coding and the money on the engineers, you're doing it for the wrong thing, that money is gone, right? Maybe you get some lessons and you can tell yourself that and it makes yourself feel better. But, truth is that money is gone, right? So do things in a way that's fast and efficient to build the product that that you need to build based off of what you're selling today, right? So you don't need to build the feature if you haven't sold it yet, if you don't have the users for it yet, right? That say that they want it. Stick to what what's been validated, what people are saying that they're going to pay for or have already paid for, and then build that, and then do it in an efficient way. So there's a saying, premature optimization is the root of all evil. Well, if you're trying to solve problems in the future that you don't have yet, it's a waste, right? If you spend that time today, solve the problems that you have today, right? Build the features that your customers are asking for today and saying they're going to cancel if you don't develop it today. So that way, if you could stay focused on, that rather than trying to solve problems in the future, scaling this and that, making the code efficient. A lot of times it's manifests in like automated tests. You could like write software and then, use test-driven development, and then no one uses that software. So it just took you much longer than if you just spun up a quick prototype, perhaps using a really efficient tech stack, right? That maybe had not been super sexy, or maybe was not the tech stack that you used when you worked at a tech company before or something like that, because they were later stage and they, had specialist roles for all these different parts and different microservices and all that. Maybe what's the right tech stack for you at that time when you're building a startup is the one that has a lot of things already taken care of for you. Because the reason why you shouldn't worry about this technical debt is because you are going to rebuild your product later.
Yep.
You're
multiple times,
and it may not look like it to the user or to the customer, but you're going to swap out things, and it's gonna get rewritten. So version 1, version 2, version 3. Back in the day, software used to have like really clear versions, and I think that was actually really helpful because it implied that like 2.0 is gonna come, right? And you know what? Maybe you built 1.0 in a way that just like you couldn't develop into 2.0. You had to create 2.0 separately with all the learnings, but you also cut all the shit that like you just didn't need. And then maybe you just migrate the customers, or maybe you just preserve 1.0 for the people that love it, but maybe there just weren't that many customers of. And then 2.0 has a lot more, and you're able to service that. Basecamp did this very nicely. They had like legacy Basecamp that they just kept running for years to keep some customers happy. But I think they also made it easy to migrate to like Basecamp 2 and 3. I think 3 was more of like an evolution of 2 and all. So assume that you are really likely to build the wrong thing, and now you're going to want to be very efficient about how you build it. And you can cut the bullshit. You can use the efficient technology stacks. Also use no-code tools. Today you have these things like Bubble. Back in the day, like we used to do stuff with like WordPress or whatever. But today you have like Bubble and Webflow, and ConvertFlow can kind of help with this because no code as well. But like for building apps, like Bubble is amazing for this. Build it there. Like don't code it. Even if you could code yourself, don't. Like you should not be recreating CRUD apps in like a Next.js stack. You just shouldn't be doing that. Bigger companies should be doing that. You can do that with Bubble today and then realize that you built the wrong thing and then just delete the Bubble app because it took you a day to build it. It's just not the end of the world. You can keep the data, keep your database separate if needed or anything like that, or just export it and then move on, right? So the no-code tools are your friend. Also, before even getting to developing in a no-code tool, build it in Figma, right? Build the mockups there. Yeah, just design it, go sell it, see what the users are saying, and, you can save yourself months. It's not just, you can save yourself years of just operating in a vacuum, coding, solving technical challenges that no one's ever going to end up, having, right? Or using, right? Go, design it first, sell based off the designs, get feedback based off the designs. Okay. Avoid the code, use the no code tools, try to exhaust these things in the most efficient way possible to make sure that you're building the right things. And then if you have a technical problem, like a technical debt problem that's developing, that means that you built the right thing. And now you have to pay off that technical debt by perhaps building a new version and migrating people over.
Right. There, you might optimize your margins more, but you're doing it for the right thing, right? That the business has been built on solving the right problems with the product. And you're not spending a lot of time and money carrying something that's not working.
Yeah, you said optimizing margins. Like a lot of times developers, they are trying to build something that's going to scale cost effectively. So they spend all this time trying to do that. But if you end up in a situation where a lot of people are using it and you have a cost margin problem, now you have a very clear problem to solve with clear data. And you can say, who's the best vendor for this? What's the best technology stack for that? What's the cost to engineer for XYZ? And you can do it based off real data with real customers to service and not just be shooting in the dark.
Right. Exactly. Next lesson is that it's okay to raise a small round. So what's important here is that you're able to go full-time quickly, right? Because that's critical to sustaining the momentum of bringing your idea to life and building, let's say, a bootstrap SaaS company. You can get pre-seed capital through angels, family and friends. You can apply to accelerators. And, by doing that, it doesn't always require being a unicorn. I think a lot of companies, a lot of founders, they're very binary about raising money or bootstrapping, right? They're thinking it's either I'm going to raise money and I'm going to become this, unicorn. And that's the only path that I have. If I decide to raise money, it's I got to go big or go home, right? And then the other side of that would be, I'm just going to bootstrap and maybe build a lifestyle business, which a lot of investors will call it a lifestyle business, but maybe people don't think about it as much like that now. Maybe it's micro SaaS, or maybe it's just a profitable business. Yeah. And so then, they make fundraising or raising money, to be a villain of some sort, where it's oh, I can never raise money because then I'm going to give up all my freedom and I'm going to give up all my control and all this stuff. But the reality is, if you don't get to a point where you're making enough money to go full time on this idea or business, then it might fizzle away, and you might have, the environment that you're working in, the economy, who knows, it might change, and you might have to just continue at your job or, go get a job. Right.
And so then you own 100% of nothing. You optimize for the dilution and it becomes nothing. Right. So it's not the end of the world. But, if you do raise that pre-seed, maybe even a seed round or whatever, it's important to be transparent about what you're trying to do, and that, they may get paid back in profits, or you may buy them out later. But those options are available.
Exactly. And even if you don't know fully, if you're still trying to figure it out, if you make people aware that, hey, we may go down this path or we may go down this path, and if they decide to invest in your company anyways because they believe in you and they want to, to see this business or this product, come to life, then they may be okay with it. So our own experience with our company was we went through one of these startup accelerators. We went through Techstars, right? And our initial thinking was that we were going to become a VC-backed company, raise a good bit of money in order to grow our team and to go to market quickly. And it getting into Techstars and raising that pre-seed capital allowed us to transition from working on our marketing agency, which was relatively small at the time, but we needed enough to cover our bills, and we needed enough to be able to like move over fully to a software business, and we didn't have enough revenue to cover everything, right? So that initial pre-seed capital helped with that. We were able to go full time on it, and from there, grow the revenue to the point where we were default alive or ramen profitable, however you want to call it. We had enough revenue to cover our bills and to focus on this thing full time. And the funding basically gave us the months of runway we needed to get to that point. And then it was real. And then we're able to focus on it full time. And we've been at it for years since then.
And we decided to not raise more money and all. And the Techstars people were totally okay with that. I don't think that like what exactly Techstars wants, like when they want companies that become unicorns and all. But in 2016, there weren't the options that there are today, right? Today you have these like pre-seed funds like Tiny Seed, etc. That like they understand like, okay, you're gonna become a profitable company. They're gonna get dividends, and or maybe get bought out and all. With Techstars, that it wasn't exactly what they wanted, but the people there, communicated it's okay for us to do what we felt like was best for the opportunity that the company actually was, right? Which wasn't like a unicorn, right? It was to build a profitable small business. So yeah, more of those options exist today. And with angels, which is individuals that are, ideally accredited investors investing in your company, if you're communicating to them, hey, not going to build a unicorn, going to build a profitable business, maybe we'll have an exit. A lot of them are going to be very happy with that. But if you raise venture capital, institutional capital, it's important to understand that they ultimately do want you to become a unicorn. So there is nuance there, but it's not a binary thing of like, money bad, like, venture capital bad or seed funding bad or, bootstrapping good. Having nothing is bad, right? Not having a business or not going full time is bad, right? But also, ending up in a situation that you don't want to be in can also be bad. So explore your fundraising options and see how you can get there full time. And if you can do it through selling, pre-selling, selling services, this and that, and you want to just fully 100%, bootstrap it, by all means, do it. But it's not taboo to raise a small round.
Yep, exactly. And if you do raise a small round, or if you don't, the next thing is to get to ramen profitability as soon as possible. So what is ramen profitability? You want to break that down, John?
When basically you can survive on ramen, figuratively, without the company having being in the red or having a limited runway. So Ethan, you used the term default alive when we talked about this.
Yeah. Basically, by default, your company is alive and hopefully growing, versus the alternative, which is default dead. Like, and honestly, a lot of companies that are raising a lot of money, if you remove the injection of capital in their business, they might be default dead. Like, the unit economics don't work, right? They don't have, like, it's too expensive to acquire customers, and without that artificial injection of artificial factors driving growth, right? Their business naturally is not a healthy business, therefore it's not going to be default alive, right? So getting to a point where you're default alive or ramen profitable is super important, because you have infinite runway to some degree, and can, you have the luxury of time to figure things out so that you can grow and build a better business.
And And like what it does is it gives you a chance to have more chances up the bat. So over time, like you may find that like the current version or idea that you had wasn't like exactly what the market needed, and you have to pivot, right? With ConvertFlow, we've done it 3 times. We're on ConvertFlow 3, where we made small but significant pivots along the way in terms of like our target customer and the niches that we've like been focused on. But and we've been at this for 7, 8 years, right? 7 to 8 years. And we've had the ability to go up to bat, to take, another, swing, right? And make adjustments and pivot because we got ConvertFlow to default live, to Ramen Profitability within a year of starting the company. Yeah. And another thing that I think is really beneficial being Ramen profitable is you understand what every dollar's worth, like, and what, how to value it. So when you sell something and money comes in, you really value it, right? And when money goes out, you really value it, right? And if you're, operating with a limited runway because of you've raised money, like a bunch of money, you don't value the money the same, right? So while by all means, consider raising, like, if it's going to help you go full time, but recognize that until you're Ramen profitable, you're not going to fully understand the value of each dollar and how it relates to your business and the business model and all. So yeah, get Ramen profitable ASAP.
Unless you maybe you've done it before, right? And are just using capital now to speed things up. Yeah. All right. And so next lesson that we've painfully learned is to hire when it repeatedly works and it hurts, right? So, founders, I think you would agree, Jon, that founders are best sometimes at finding what works because they have a lot of context on the business, right? And, not like there are obviously specific people that you can work with that, understand certain channels or understand certain go-to-markets, and they can speed things up for you to some degree, but they may not have the context that you have on your business, and therefore they're not going to see the same opportunities. They're not going to understand how to identify whether something's working well or not, and if it's moving you towards your ultimate vision or goal, right? So,
and if they do, they might need to be co-founders themselves, or partners, or have a lot of equity, or just get paid a very, very high salary that you may not be able to afford when you're bootstrapping.
Exactly. Then that's totally true. And if you hire too prematurely, right? So a lot of people will think, hey, we need to go do this now. Like we need to do paid ads, or we need to do, we need to build this whole area of the product before we even know whether customers really want it or whether that's like a core part of the business. So then we're going to go hire engineers for this, or we're going to go hire, a paid ads specialist internally to like run our paid ads and things like that. Before you even found and validated whether those things are important and actually work for the business and have been doing it long enough where it's painfully eating away at your time, and you can't focus on other things because it works and you're having to give time to it. So you have to do it yourself. That's the point where you really want to hire and bring someone in internally, not before that, because otherwise it's a disservice to the person, because when you find out that it no longer, it's not going to work for you, then you have to let them go, and it's really painful.
It's really painful. Yep. Yeah. I think the key thing here is like, if you're bootstrapping, you're running things profitably, the founders are the ones who typically have to carve out the workflow for others. They got to go, into the foggy night and, find their way through it, right? And then, leave behind a path that others can follow, right? And develop the playbooks and the templates and the units of work, the systems and all of that, prove that concept and get some repetitions into that workflow happening. And then, okay, it's working repeatably, but now it's also repeatably painful for the founder, right? For us. And that is a good sign that like we might need to make a hire because it's repeatedly working and it's repeatedly painful. We need to buy back our time, right? However, when it comes to hiring though, you know, there's definitely ways to efficiently hire and to prevent, you know, premature hiring. So I think a good way to put it would be to first eliminate, right? So check, like, do you even need to be doing this work? Check the numbers. You know, is this like work that even really needs to happen? I think that's something that a lot of people miss. It's like they may have like a whole thing happening, like a whole, you know, initiative happening or something that they've just been doing for years. And maybe they just don't need to be doing it. Like maybe they can just cut that out entirely and it doesn't really impact business. It's happened for us. You know, we've cut some things and didn't really change much, right? And that was just probably something that we just didn't need to be doing. So eliminate work that you don't need to be doing. Step one. Step two, if you still have to do that work, you can't eliminate it. Can you automate it? Can you hire software or AI to do the work, right? If you could automate it, then there's no need to hire someone to do it. We added an example. I think we upgraded to HubSpot's enterprise plan to be able to do email sequences from personal emails, like cold email and warm email sequences and all. We were able to automate that. So that eliminated the need for us to go hire a BDR, the business development rep. We were able to automate it first and let the software handle the sequences and all before we get to that, right? Okay. The third thing, the third step would be, can you outsource it? Okay, so you can't automate it. There's still like some creative workload that needs to happen. You can't fully automate it. There's just not the software out there yet. Okay, maybe we could outsource it. Maybe there's an agency that could be hired. Maybe there's a productized service that could be hired. This is really common for things like finance. You know, before you hire an in-house accountant, you probably going to go find an accounting firm, right? So you could just completely outsource that if, you know, for the gap that can't be automated, right? Because someone's got to do the filing. Someone's got to check the books. You know, that part right there, you could have, you know, a productized service do it, or perhaps hire a consultant for a limited window or a freelancer for a limited window for a project, right? And then maybe that workflow is just not really needed after the fact because you leave behind like good enough stuff that you just don't need to make a hire for. And then the last thing would be to delegate.
Wait, I think there's one step before that, which is like before outsourcing it, like can you delegate it internally, right? Because you know sometimes the workload is not enough to fully outsource. Or you may not need to pay like the rates, for example, to fully outsource that, right? And you may not be at a point where you need a full-time hire. So, you know, is there enough work to justify just delegating it internally? And do you have the expertise, or could you train someone if you define the playbooks or internally to be able to take on that work? Is there availability, right? Do they even want to do that work, right? And if not, you know, once you ran through those different, you know, options, then outsource and then get to the other point, which would be what you're coming up to.
Delegate externally, which would be to like go find someone because you don't have the talent internally and you go hire, right? Full time. But that's the last resort because with that, you know, comes a lot. And there's a lot of responsibility, a lot of accountability, and a lot of cost. And if you're running if you're running a profitable business, you have to exhaust your other options first before you get to that point to do what's right for the business, but also to do right by the hire. So that way you have a good opportunity for them that's long term, right?
Right. I think what we saw, you know, with you know, this last like tech boom or post tech boom is that, you know, a lot of companies are having to make layoffs, right? And it's because they grew and hired probably ahead of what they actually needed, right? And it's not fair, to people when you do that sometimes, because, as soon as, things change and you realize that that work's not as necessary, or maybe it's not something you should continue doing, then, you have to make layoffs. And these people, chose opportunity, like they have opportunity costs when they choose to work for you full time, right? And so they're choosing the opportunity you're providing them with over another opportunity. And if you don't know that work is, critical to the business, then it's probably not fair to bring someone in full time for that.
Yep. So we've learned that lesson, and we're seeing it play out in the tech industry, and a lot of initiatives that maybe shouldn't exist or could have been a freelance project before they became a full-time thing. Okay. The next lesson here is that execution reveals the strategy. So
I know this one is something you feel strongly about. So let's hear you riff on it.
Yeah. So, we've all heard like planning is guessing, and basically if you have a plan and you try to execute it, a lot of times you find that it just doesn't work out. And the reason why is because you made that plan with information, in the past, right? And new information comes up. Ethan, there's like this work quote you had mentioned. It was like, plans stop working when the first bullet is fired, or something like that, right?
Exactly.
Makes perfect sense. So the strategy is revealed by execution. So what does that mean? What is execution? Well, I think it's just servicing the market. There are people that have the problem, you have a solution, and there's all the work and the repetitions that needs to happen, the blocking and the tackling, right? It needs to happen to just service the market, service the demand. And when you do that, what happens is that a feedback loop starts to form. You start to see patterns, right? And then ideas start to come from, market demands, from customer feedback, from things breaking, from things costing too much, and so on. And then, with that information, you're able to take action based off that, real information coming to you, real feedback from the market. And then that feedback loop is there, and you can iterate upon that. So there's this Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase. He has this quote that, actions produce information, and something along the lines of that, like a shark, swimming, looking around, looking for food, just constantly feeling it out, checking, and it's, if you stop getting information, you stop, acting, you stop getting information, then you stop swimming, right? So you just have to keep swimming, like Nemo, right? And trying to get new information, into the feedback loop, and then taking action. And then what happens is that in hindsight, there's a clear strategy, and you're like, oh, okay, this is what's working. This is the strategy, and let's improve upon it. Let's make it better. And it's based off of the real world and not based off of, ideology in your head, right? Or a playbook that you heard from someone else, right?
Right.
That you said, what, we're going to execute steps 1, 2, 3 for the next like X number of months. And then you get there and you're like, this is not even like relevant to like what's happening right now. It's like that.
I think, this in many ways kind of goes against what a lot of companies are doing. And we've done this, we've made the mistake in the past of focusing, a lot on strategy, and then, try to execute that strategy and it just not working, right? And then we have to pivot or change our direction or change our approach. And I think, part of the reason why like a lot of companies will focus on like strategy is, one, they've got to deploy a lot of resources, right? In order to like, especially if they raise a bunch of money, right? To achieve something. But also the, companies are making decisions on a quarterly basis, annual basis. They're trying to work backwards from their end goals, OKRs, right? And sometimes all of that is overkill for a small startup or, a company that's just getting started. You really need real-time feedback. And then from there, you're iterating because you're guessing otherwise. And you may not have the history in order to make, judgment calls like that and form strategies that take months or a year plus to execute, right? So you gotta iterate based on feedback that you're getting. And well, it's okay to maybe do a little bit of planning, obviously, like execute on that as quickly as possible, so that you can get feedback, you can start validating, and then from there you start to form the strategy, as you were saying, John, based on what is working and based on the pattern that you see being defined there. So,
and like
super
what
important.
this sounds like, the strategy stuff may look like or sound like moats. Like people talk about like these defensive moats that like make a company unique and valuable and all, like that's the strategy, right? But that stuff is revealed by taking action and executing. And a lot of it is just the manner with which you execute, being able to execute really quickly, being able to do it really efficiently. Like those sorts of things are strategy as well, right? So execution forms the strategy.
So the next lesson, that we've experienced here and learned is that the best mentors are the ones who just did it. So, we've talked to people who, built much bigger companies, or who are maybe just investors now and are not like operating their own company, and have gotten feedback from all kinds of people, advice, and, unless they're currently going through the same like challenges and just like overcame them or just a little bit further along than where we are, a lot of the feedback and advice is not always applicable because one, things are changing quickly within the technology landscape and within the market and also within the economy, right? So, some of the strategies and advice, might really apply, might have applied well a few years ago, but today, are not as applicable. Exactly. Yeah. So those, that advice may not apply as well today. So now someone who is currently doing it and is a little further ahead than you, or, has recently gotten to the point where they achieved the goal that you wanted to achieve, going to them and, trying to reverse engineer what they did, may not give you a strategy that you can replicate entirely, but, because every company is different, and things may, be slightly different for you, but a lot of it may apply, right? And so
yeah, there's a lot of clues in that. They're fresh, They're relevant, and like, people love to mentor and coach, so like they'll give you they'll answer. Like if you ask them like, hey, how'd you do this like last year when you went through that, they're like, yeah, I did this. And like you need that kind of mentorship, but it needs to be recent and relevant. I would be very careful learning and taking advice from people who haven't done it. Like that's a given, that one's obvious. If they haven't done it, don't even listen to them. Like, I mean, you can like consider that feedback as like a data point and all, but if they haven't done it themselves, careful, because that advice can be very, very confusing and jarring. Or if they did it, but maybe they just did it a long time ago in a different, economic environment, a different time, different, a different culture and this and that, stuff to learn from it, but it may not be as valuable as the person who more recently did it in more current times.
So you added a sub point here, which is ask questions while you're currently doing it. So whatever it is you want mentorship on, make sure you're at a point where you're actually like implementing and doing something, because when you get mentorship, you need to be ready. Like there's that saying that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Well, like you can go to the teacher, you can go to the mentor and try to get feedback on something, but like unless you're in the middle of it and actually implementing and you know how to like execute some of the feedback that they're giving you, it's just not going to be valuable, right? Because who knows when you're going to implement that.
And it may not be a good use of their time as well.
And it might not be scoped to your situation, because, you can only go off of maybe how other companies have approached something and how you're thinking about approaching something, rather than like, what's actually starting to work or not work for you. And then from there, get tailored feedback based on your situation.
Okay. All right. The last lesson that we have listed here. So above all, reason by first principles and not by proxy. So what that essentially means is that you need to come to your own conclusions based off what you have seen to be true, right? Your own observations, right? Rather than hearing it from someone else and then you're looking at what someone else is doing, maybe like looking at what a competitor is doing and saying, we need to be doing that because this competitor is doing that. It's like,
right.
Well, your customers are saying this, and you listen to your customers, right? This is observable. This is true. It's true for your business, right? And working backwards from that is so much better than reasoning by proxy, looking at what other people are doing and just following what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree. And reflecting on your own situation, what's worked for you, and then trusting your gut, because unfortunately, like trusting our gut, may not always like sound like the sanest approach to things, but it that gut feeling that you have, comes from a lot of information, a lot of data points, and it's an instinct on like what could potentially work. Your subconscious as well, right? So yeah, if your gut's telling you, to do something for the business, and you're using a first principles, or to not do something, and then you're using a first principles approach to kind of work back, work up from what's true for your business, what to be working, and you can kind of build a good case for why you should trust your gut, then do that. And everyone else may tell you you're wrong for doing that, you shouldn't do that, but if that's what your gut's kind of telling you about your business, then you need to follow that, because no one knows your business like you do. There are other people who know your type of business or category of business pretty well, and you should listen to them and get feedback, but ultimately you need to execute based on what's true for your business and your customers.
Yeah, the gut thing is interesting because it seems like, kind of woo-woo, but really what it is it's a subconscious values versus like, the actions you need to take not like matching up with those values, right? And subconsciously, that. And, logically, it may make sense, I need to do X, Y, Z, but if it's not aligning with where you want to be long-term, subconsciously, your gut's going to tell you. And it's going to feel wrong, and it's subtle, but learning how to like recognize what that feels like is a superpower. So yeah,
I think there's probably a good case to have a follow-up, session on gut, because when it comes to like hiring, trusting your gut might not be the best advice or something like that. So yeah, it's probably a good case to do a follow-up session on this.
Yeah, like it doesn't always apply, and like there's times where you have to know when you need to bring in like new information, and your gut is like operating entirely on like the wrong information or whatever, because it hasn't like worked,
or your own bias.
Yeah, but nevertheless, it needs to be you need to be reasoning by your observations and what you've seen to be true. And it needs to be aligned with your values, like where you're going, and not because someone else said so.
Exactly. Cool. I think that's a wrap. So I don't know how many lessons that was. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I think it was like 19 lessons we've learned.
Okay.
Bootstrapping.
That's too many.
Our SaaS company to a million plus in revenue.
10. If you saw 10 in the title, we lied to you because we had more.
Exactly. That's right.